Hello again. This is episode or lesson 6 from 100 lessons from Dominie's log. Right, now this lesson is to do with seating. If you are a teacher, you know that seating of the children is very, very important in terms of where they sit. And in fact, in terms of the arrangement of the seating. In my first year of teaching, I taught in a city school in Bradford, and the humanities teacher let me see how he taught. So he invited me to his classroom, and he had all the textbooks on the desk, and he'd written on the board what pages to turn to, what parts to read, what questions to answer. And he gave out their books, their writing books, and told them to collect the textbooks from the desk, which they did. And then he turned to me and said, right, I'm going to show you something. And he turned to the class and said, right, the instructions on the board, you're doing chapter 9 and you're looking at these pages and you're answering these questions. And so they started their work, and the interesting thing here is that all the desks were separate, so the children were all seated separately. They weren't even in pairs. There was a distance between. It was like an exam classroom. And then he took me for a walk out of the class around the school, chatting about teaching and about his method, and about how one of the things that his philosophy, in fact, was his heart rate was not to change during the day. It was going to be the same in the afternoon as it had been when he arrived in the morning. And when we came back, there was a bit of noise, and he told them off and silenced them, and turned to me and said, well, that wasn't... He said he expected silence when he arrived back, and they was a bit disappointed. So that's one story about seating, which I think shows you some of the philosophy of teachers who are trained to manage their classrooms and to control behaviour and to use the structure and authority of a classroom in order to make sure that the children obey them. So it was interesting because the humanities textbook that he was using was all about role play and about debate and about active participation and learning, and of all the subjects. And he was the head of humanities of this school. Anyway, this is a story to do with seating, but it doesn't start with seating. It starts with A.S.Neill, who's writing about his, as I said, his first year as head teacher at Gretna Green school, because he's replaced the other head who's sort of gone off to be a soldier. And he says, this is the morning. I heard a blackie, that's a blackbird, this morning as I went to school, and when I came near to the playground I heard the girls singing, and I realised that Lenton was come with love to town. The game was a jing-jarring, and Violet Brown was in the centre. So all the children had formed a circle around Violet Brown, and a jing-jarring means that they were singing a children's song for the game. So the song went, the wind and the wind and the wind blows high, the rain comes pattering from the sky. Violet Brown says she'll die for the lad with the rolling eye. She is handsome, she is pretty, she is the girl of the golden city. She is counted 1, 2, 3. Oh, I wonder who he'll be. Willie Craig says he loves her. My own experiences, my own early experiences told me that Willie Craig, the boy, wasn't far off. Yes, there he was at the same old game. When Vi entered the ring, Willie began to hammer, which means to hit, to hammer Georgie Steele with his bonnet, his hat. But I could see Violet watching him with a corner of her eye, and I'm quite sure that she was aware that the exertion of hammering Geordie did not account for Willie's burning cheeks. Then Katie Farmer entered the ring, And Tom Dixon at once became the hammerer of Geordie. Poor Geordie. Poor wee Geordie. I know that he loves Katie himself. And I know that between blows he is listening for the fatal Tom Dixon says he loves her. So A.S.Neill is just listening in on the game as he walks into through the playground into the building. And what does he do when he arrives? Or later on, I should say, the next morning. I rearranged the seats this morning, and Willie is now sitting behind his Vi. But Tom Dixon is not behind Katie. If you remember, Willie was the one named for Vi, and Tom Dixon was the one named for Katie. But Tom Dixon is not behind Katie. Poor despised Geordie, the one that was hit, is there. But I shall shift him tomorrow if he does not make the most of his chances. So here is a teacher moving the seats of the children simply to see whether Geordie will actually possibly try and express his love to Katie. This morning, Geordie passed a note over to Katie. Then he sat all in a tremble. I saw Katie read it, and I saw her blush. I blew my nose violently, for I knew what was written on that sacred sheet. At least I thought I knew. Dear Katie, will you please be my lass? I will have you if you will have me. Signed, Geordie. At break, at minutes it's called, he calls the break, I listened for the name when Katie went into the ring. It was Tom Dixon again. I blew my whistle and stopped the game. So he's in charge of the playground and he stopped them from playing the game because they've named the wrong boy. At dinner time, I looked out of the window and rejoiced to see poor Geordie hitting Tom Dixon. I opened the window and listened. Katie was in the ring again, and I almost shouted, "Hurrah!" when I heard the words, "Geordie still says he loves her." But I placed Tom Dixon behind Katie in the afternoon. I felt that I had treated poor Tom with injustice. So, this is A.S.Neill playing around with the seating of the children, simply to see whether a note will be passed and whether the games the children are playing of their sweethearts will change. And then out of guilt he changes them back again. I don't think many teachers nowadays would use micromanagement and behaviour control in meetings, in classrooms, to see who fancies who and who would pass a note to who. I think they've lost that sense of joy of childhood and only see it as a way of making sure they can keep control of a classroom in order that the children learn efficiently so that they can get their SATs and their exams. And how does he finish that night? He says, "Tonight I tried to tackle Form 9B. I think this is one of the forms that you have to fill in towards the end of a term. Maybe to do with statistics or something of the term. But I could not concentrate. But it wasn't Violet and Katie that I was thinking of. I was thinking of the Violets and Katie's I wrote notes to many years ago. I fear I'm a bit of a sentimentalist, yet why the devil shouldn't I be?" So I think it's a lovely little short story, which is, this book's full of these little moments which you just quickly pass by, but which, you know, you can think, how do we now choose where children sit and why? Well, that's the lesson for lesson 6. Thank you very much indeed. Bye bye.